So I started doing this book right here with my one of my friends as a Bible study, and we've really been enjoying it and everything. So yeah, I was just like, oh man, I should reach out to her and see if she'd be interested in being interviewed.
I love that. I love that you're doing it with your friend together.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've been meeting once a week like FaceTime at night or whatever after supper and kind of like just discussing the questions and then kind of like going through different sections that we liked or that really
Uh-huh.
resonated with us and whatnot.
Great.
Yeah, yeah. So it's been super fun. So can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and about your books and kind of how you came to, start writing?
Yeah. So I live in Indiana. Pretty much been growing up in the Midwest my whole life. I'm married to my high school sweetheart. We're going on 22 years now. We
Amazing.
have three teenagers, so we are up to our ears in all the teenager hormones, what we
Oh,
got
I'm
going
sure.
on right now. Yeah. Um, I also work full time with a foster care agency. I do all of the licensing and paperwork for foster parents
Mhm.
and also for adoptee or adoptions. So I'm doing that as well as writing.
Okay,
And yeah, so I kind of do a mixture of between the two.
that's awesome.
We as a family, we're pretty active. We love to hike. That's generally what our vacations are. We just go somewhere and hike someplace.
That's
Like this
cool.
summer, we're going to the Grand Canyon. So
Yes,
we're
that'll be
heading the whole
fun.
thing. Like that's our plan. So
Gonna do the whole thing. Um,
yes, gives you an idea of like that's what when we hike, that's what we do.
that's cool. That's cool. Have you guys
Yeah.
ever done the Grand Canyon hike like that, or will this be the first time?
Um, no, my husband did it 5 years ago. And when we were
Okay.
done, we said, hey, our kids need to come back and do this.
Yeah.
So our son is going to be a senior next year. So we wanted to do it before he graduated. So this would be the summer to do it.
Cool. That sounds awesome. That'll be
Yeah.
great. I like hiking too. My
Yeah.
husband and I like to go to like Glacier and Yellowstone,
Oh,
and we love going out there.
yeah. Glacier is a bucket list place. And
Oh,
we,
so
so we
beautiful.
live in the Midwest. So it's
Yeah.
pretty flat. So I don't
Yeah.
want people to get the impression that I'm like this hardcore hiker because where we live, like hiking is actually you just take a walk in the woods because there's no elevation change.
Yeah.
So you could do any kind of hiking. I'm up for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I'm in the Midwest too. I'm in North Dakota and Minnesota.
Oh,
So
yeah.
right now I'm at my parents' place in Minnesota, but I live in North Dakota, so very flat as well.
Okay.
So I
Yes.
completely get that. So we kind of have to escape quite a few hours to get into like Wyoming and Montana to get some milk.
Yes. Just like with my writing and where that evolved from.
Yeah.
I have always been a writer. I've actually, even as a child, wanted to write a book someday, but it's kind of like a pipe dream. Like, I don't know how that
Awesome.
would even happen.
Yep.
And I noticed really like I started blogging when our son was born, mostly so the grandmas could see pictures because
Cool. Yeah.
it was before, just right before social media was really a thing. He was born in 2006. So it was right before then. So I started blogging mostly to talk about my kids, but I
Okay.
started to discover like how therapeutic it was for me to like process through words.
Hmm.
And so over time, that blog evolved into more about less about the parenting and what I was learning from that, more into we fostered for 5.5 years. So more about like what we learned
Oh,
through
wow.
foster, but
Yep.
more about what we learned about ourselves
Yeah.
during the fostering.
Uh-huh.
And then when I started to discover more about like just my own mental health struggles and having a name for it and started going healing, then evolved even more into that. And so that is
Hmm.
where I'm at now with as far as writing. It's the ministry is called The Intentional Life,
I love that.
and it focuses on intentional moments, small intentional moments every day to be purposeful that we are our lives are for God's glory and we're pointing others to Jesus. And so that's
Mm.
kind of like the core behind my ministry. And
Yep.
it comes out of my healing with my general anxiety disorder.
Okay. I love that. Like that you've been able to take something that you've struggled with in your life and be able to use
Mhm.
it for good to help other people live their best,
Yes.
most intentional life as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. So, can you tell me a little bit more about your journey with anxiety and stuff? Because you kind of have like mentioned it a bit, and it is covered some a bit in the book too. But for anyone that doesn't really know, or even if you'd like to share a little bit more deep, like how did the whole anxiety thing start for you, and what's your journey been like with it?
Yeah. So my first memories of being anxious actually go back to like when I was 10.
Okay.
I'm fairly certain it's probably even started before that, but that's what I can remember. But back then I was just told, don't worry about it, or just calm down, or that's not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kept trying to do exactly that, like to not worry about it. And I kind of lived the narrative for decades, really.
Mm-hmm.
Even when I became a Christian, it became even more so because then I was reading all the scripture about like cast all your anxiety on him, like do not fear, because just all the things that were telling me that I did not, I could not worry.
Mm-hmm.
And the message I took is not the correct one, but it's the one I took, was that it kind of worry that I had going on was a sin. There was something sinful in my life I needed to get rid of. And I could not get rid of that feeling. So therefore, to myself, I thought there was something wrong with me, like
Mm-hmm.
in my soul, more than like
Mm-hmm.
now I have learned that like actually anxiety can be rooted. It can be rooted in like there could be something unresolved in your life that needs to be rooted out, but it also can be chemical imbalance in your brain
Mm,
that's
yes.
communicating some miscommunication. It wasn't until I was 36 when I actually went and I actually called a hotline because I was to the point of considering suicide. I didn't
Mm,
have a plan, but I was definitely thinking about it, like thinking that was maybe a better option than living.
mm,
And that scared me. So
yeah.
I called and they connected me with resources that are local. So I started seeing a doctor, I started seeing a counselor, and they
Mm,
diagnosed me with generalized anxiety disorder at that point.
okay.
And now it's like back in 2018. So now
Mm,
it's just the continual going through the work, learning, the healing, and realizing that I that generalized anxiety disorder probably was all the way back in elementary. So I
wow.
was fighting against a diagnosis my entire life
Mhm.
for like 3 decades.
Wow.
Once I had that, it's just, I mean, when we think about our in our lives, like once you have the knowledge of something, like you realize something about yourself, like you just start to see things through a different perspective or through
Yeah.
filter. And that's really where the healing started for me, is when I had a name for it, and I
Mm.
could, instead of like shoving it down because they're telling me I shouldn't worry. So I'm just like, okay, well, I can't let that out because then everybody's going to see what a terrible Christian I am because I can't stop this. And actually calling it out for what it is, turning it over and continue to work through it. Like, definitely Jesus is in the middle of all this. We're not,
Mhm.
yeah, counting him at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that is just yeah, I completely I relate because I think a lot of people would relate to this too because I feel like anxiety is just something that is so um big in our world today. And
Hmm.
I know like going back to when I was younger too, I'd worry about things and stuff. And yeah, same like type of thing of, oh, don't worry about it. Just that it's fine. Oh, you're fine. Just try not to think about it. It's like, and people telling you that, out of good faith too. And but what are some things that people could do for if someone in their life or say themselves are dealing with constant worries and anxiety like that? And maybe better advice than just don't worry about it or you're okay. What are some things that you think people should
Yes.
maybe say to encourage that person?
Yeah. If someone is telling you that they are very anxious about something, and in your mind, you're thinking, like, this is not that big a deal, don't say that out loud.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's actually like it's helpful to acknowledge that what they're feeling is real. Um, so instead of like, oh, that is not that big a deal, you're like, okay, that sounds like it's really consuming a lot of your thoughts. That sounds really big.
Hmm.
So, what can we do to help it feel not so big in your life? Like, do you need to talk out, like, I like to call it landing the plane. I think I talk about this in my book in one of there's a section in there where
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it was maybe in the one about flying gives me anxiety. Like
I think so.
needing to create a runway, land that plane. So sometimes it's talking through like the what's the worst thing could happen? What's the best thing that could happen? Because often it'll fall right in the middle of that. No one's gonna
Mhm.
die. You're not gonna win $1 million, like something right there in the middle.
Yeah.
And helping them give it a surface to be like, okay, because they also in their mind know that it's not that big a deal.
Mhm.
It feels like it in their body. So being able to communicate between the body and the mind that it kind of puts it in the right perspective of just how big of a
Yeah.
deal it really is. So I think just first and foremost, not discrediting someone who is struggling with some kind of anxiety. Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
to
No,
begin.
that's a really good point. I think that's very helpful and everything. Um,
I feel like anxiety is something like when I'm in my heart seasons where it's these thoughts that do not stop. They just going round and round and round. It's really hard to, and that's what part of like landing the plane for one of those.
yeah.
Um, I think finding someone that could be a trusted source to be able to say these things out loud to,
Mhm.
um, that is just going to be able to listen with an open ear, not to tell you to calm down or to forget about it. And also not one that's just going to like blow it up even bigger for you
Yeah.
because you don't need any help with that. You're doing it
Right.
just fine yourself. But
Yep.
someone who's willing to listen, because sometimes just speaking it out loud can help bring it into, I mean, it's really just about like get it in that darkness of our thoughts and bringing it into the light. There's something
Mhm.
about talking it out loud with someone because often if we're anxious about these things, like I said, we in our minds, we kind of know it's not that big a deal. And so we
Mhm.
don't really share all of those things out loud with anyone. Just keep them inside and we just keep
Yeah.
ruminating on them and they just keep making our whole body feel bunched up and um I
Tense
feel
and
sometimes feel
stressed.
buzzing. Yeah, like a
Yeah.
buzzing feeling. But talking about it with somebody, not necessarily won't find a solution, but again, like, just
Mhm.
brings it to the light. And I feel like it takes the power away from the enemy.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, yeah, I think the important thing and that we often will lose is the amount of time we spend in God's word
Mhm.
and in his presence. Because if we
Mm.
really want to speak truth over those lies, we have to know what the truth is.
Yep.
And it's not gonna happen with reading 2 verses and then going on your day and doing that, like, once a week, or
Mm.
even catching it in a post on social media, like, that is not gonna equip you
Yeah.
with the words of truth that you need to fight against Satan.
Mhm. Yep.
Um, like, there needs to be and there's a discipline involved that you're needing to find the time, like, something else might need to be given up, like, the very first thing I'm gonna ask is, like, how much time are you scrolling on social media? How much
Right.
time are you spending on a phone? Because there are people who are like, "I have no time for anything." Go to your phone and see how much it tells you how much screen time a day you have, and
Yep.
I bet you're gonna find, like, 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Like,
Easily.
there's actually a lot of time that if we be honest with ourselves, like, even myself, I mean, if I go look at my screen time, it could be definitely less. But if we're finding that, like, we cannot let go of this anxiety, that is a really good place to start,
Mm.
is
Yes.
turning off the sounds of the world and tuning in to God and his word. And just even if it's just starting with Psalms, like,
Ah.
sometimes we might be in a period of life where we cannot digest some really deep scripture. It
Mhm.
just like to really get into some good Bible study. And sometimes it's a reading a psalm every single day, and just sometimes it's the same psalm over and over, but it starts like just get into our pores and think that
Mm.
we're carrying it with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I love how you
There's so
put that.
many that like that David wrote when he was in a hard place
Yeah.
that I feel like we can just connect with. And
There
it's
you
like
go. Yeah.
he was so many of them are where he has some kind of complaint or some a hard thing, and then he turns it back to like, "But you are faithful, but you are loving, you are"
Mhm.
like, so I feel like it puts that balance in there for us to
Yes.
just
Perfect. And then, so do you want to tell us a little bit about your book and also what kind of inspired you to write it and everything?
yeah. This book did not end up how I initially thought it was going to be, but I think that's
Okay.
very much how God works.
Yeah. Yeah. No
I
kidding.
when I said I started my healing journey with my anxiety disorder, like in 2018, I was doing some writing then, but about a year later, 2019, I really started focusing on this word of intention because I was finding it was so key in my life that every day I needed to be intentional with what I was doing. Like really
Okay.
to get a handle on where my anxiety was in my life, I couldn't just, oh, well, let's see if take our day and just live it. I had to like make intentional choices every day and it would
Yeah.
be small because like sometimes if you're filled with anxiety, just the small can be overwhelming. So just
Mhm.
looking for some small moments each day to be intentional.
Mm.
So I started it as an email series that each week I was going to write on a different topic on being intentional. And I was do it for a year. And I thought, okay, that's 52 weeks. At the end of the year, I'm going to have 52 devotions. I'm going to throw it into a
Cool. Very cool.
well, yes, at the end of 2019, going into 2020, I had 50 devotions to write are all put together, but I ended up probably only in half of those. And so I ended up the whole other half of the book are like all new devotions that I wrote.
Oh, wow.
And
Cool.
yeah, so it became a process. Then 2020, when you're like, we're all in shutdown, I'm like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
gonna have time to write. Well, that didn't happen because you're all in like the same house together. Just like how you thought, like, oh, I'm gonna get
Yeah.
this house clean. No, you can't because we're all just living in the house together.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it came like a whole nother year before it was complete, and then a whole nother year of getting it into the book and the editing. And
Right.
yeah, so that's kind of like where it started, the whole intentional. And I still do that weekly email series. I do something new every single week that
Oh,
focuses on
cool.
being intentional. And so this I took from those 52 weeks, I focus on 7 different areas that are in this book. And I kind of divide them into 7 for one, because God likes the number 7. He finds it to be perfect. I thought I might as well just stick with it. I'm
Why
kind of
not? Yeah.
recovering perfectionist, so it kind of works.
It works
And
that way
I just
then.
felt like, yes. And I just like all the different things going on in life, they can kind of go into one of these 7 categories.
Mhm.
So it starts with our heart. Where are we at with our heart? And then it goes right to the thoughts. And then we have money, because that one can cause a lot of anxiety. Relationships, health, time, and our home.
Yep. I love it. I
So,
love that you go and cover those, like, those different areas because I feel like they all like, in our world today, it's crazy and it's moving a mile a minute, and if we don't just sit down and think about, like, each of those small little areas that make up our lives, I feel like
mhm,
sometimes even you can be sitting and thinking, okay, why do I feel anxious? I feel anxious. Why do I feel anxious? And then if you get down to the thinking about it, it might be just a small little section of one of those parts of
yes,
your life. And so I love
yes,
that you touched on all of those in your book. I feel like that was
yeah,
a really cool way to do it.
yeah. And I kind of wrote it in a way that you could just read and then think on that for a week if you wanted to. So
Yeah.
if you just one a week, it would take you about a year to go through if you did it that way, or you could focus on one a month. So it'd be like 7 months altogether,
Right. Yeah.
one of the topics. And then
Yeah.
I purposely at the end put a prayer that you can do, because I feel like sometimes we don't know what to pray. And so just
Yeah.
have something that you could lead a person through that was
Mhm.
topical to that division. And then I pretty much I I put 3 reflection questions at the end
Okay.
of each devotion.
Yep.
And for the most, if you noticed, it's the very same question every single
Yeah.
time. And I
Yep.
did that purposely because
Okay.
I sometimes I would go through a book and I'm just like, there are so many questions, like I can't even process all of
Yeah.
this. And so I
Yeah.
felt like I just really couldn't dig deep into what the questions were wondering.
Yeah.
But when the same 3 questions are asked after the end of one, my hope is by the end of the book, you're kind of thinking through those 3 things. So a
Yeah.
focus throughout the book being called Numbering Our Days, and
Mhm.
that comes from Psalm 90:12. Teach us to number our days that we may have a heart of wisdom.
Mm.
And the and that's resting in the fact that when we recognize that each of us are given a certain number of days, like that should not make us feel anxious. It should actually make us realize that like God, we are placed here for a purpose. So let's be intentional with this day that we've been given.
Yes.
So the 3 things that I call the reader to is first to recognize the temporal. So what
Mm.
part of our life are we becoming focused on that's making us feel anxious? Because it's
Mm.
most likely like something temporal. And
Yes.
then reconnecting to the eternal. So through like something, whatever that thing that's causing me to be anxious, what part of that can I bring Jesus into?
Yep.
Even if it's just bringing it to Jesus,
Yeah.
but bringing in that eternal focus and then refocusing our attention. And it's just that, like, kind of like how the intentional life I said at the beginning, how we're living for Jesus and living for his glory and pointing others to
Mm.
him. Like if each of our actions
Yep.
is if that's interwoven into it.
Yeah. I love that you kind of broke down those questions a bit more because I was actually going to ask you about the questions and everything. But yeah, you answered the question. I really love that though, because then it kind of just cements that, that thought process of going over those three questions in your mind. And it kind of helps with even the anxiety and stuff. So I think that's really helpful and everything. So that's really good information. And then you also, I saw, have some other books and stuff out there too. Could you tell us a little bit about your other books?
Yeah. So the very first book I put out there was actually an Advent devotional.
Oh, cool.
And it was focused, it's these 7 areas, but it's focused more on during that Advent season. And it's
Cool.
just looking at each of those areas in our lives that can be focused on Jesus and
Yeah.
preparing our heart or preparing all those different areas for him.
Yep.
And then the other one is a Lent or Easter. I say Lent just because you can read it in those 40 days leading up to Easter, but
Yeah.
it kind of culminates with the Easter
Okay.
holiday. And again, it's looking at those, it uses those 7 areas again, but it turns it into you're thinking through them when in light
Mm.
of um
The
really
time
about
of
like how what Lent is about as far as fasting
Yep.
and s- bringing ourselves back from excess and hurry instead
Mm.
of slowing down and simplifying and just
Yeah.
looking at those areas.
I
Yeah. And
love
then
that.
I also have a course
Okay.
that's out there, Peace and Purpose course. It's derived from this book.
Okay.
So again, it's like a 7 or 8 week course. And so each week we cover a different one of those topics.
Okay.
But then I also have there's a video of me going along with, and then you get resources each week, and it's then life access that you
Ah,
have to the
cool.
videos and the resources.
I'll be sure to share
Yeah.
the link below in the description for anyone that wants to check that out.
Yeah. Yeah. Be great. Yeah, I'll send it
Yeah,
to
that's
you.
awesome. That's cool. Yeah, and then are you working on anything else in the near future? Are you working on anything right now that you're excited
Yeah.
about?
I actually have a couple projects. One that is to the point where in editing, getting it to the book form
Okay.
is one for teens.
Oh,
And it's asking, again, I like 7. I just stick
yeah.
with it. But the 7 different questions to help you find your place in this world.
Oh,
It's written
cool.
directly towards yeah, teens.
Yes, I
I
love
have
that.
my 2 teen daughters are helping with it. I'm
Oh,
having them read through it and give me feedback, so there's gonna be little bits of that in there. I'm
yeah.
excited about.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's so
and then I have
cool.
another book that I'm in the baby stages of that, going to be a bit more of my story
Yep.
and what I have learned through
Mm.
anxiety and, um, I've yeah, interweaving some more lessons that I've learned from that.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Well, I'm excited to see more from you because really enjoyed this Numbering Our Days book. And my friend was like, tell her thank you for writing it. So
Oh.
definitely want to thank you for writing it and for listening to God and writing it and sharing it with the world. Because I feel like our world
Oh, I love this.
needs peace, needs Jesus more now than ever um,
Yeah.
with the craziness and everything. So I really love that. So thank you for writing it and keep writing.
Yes.
And do you feel like there's any other message that you feel like people should hear right now that has to do with
Yeah,
like, anxiety and that the battlefield of
yeah,
the mind?
I just want to remind anyone who's struggling with anxiety or any kind of mental illness, like
Yep.
maybe it's depression, or some other mental illness diagnosis. Like this does not disqualify you in the eyes of God. Like
Hmm.
you do not need to have this figured out before you come to him. Like he is the ultimate healer. And true, like I know he like heal me from this general anxiety disorder right now. I could walk away from and not have to feel like I'm always burdened with it.
Mm.
But then I also know that it is what is bringing me back to him every single day. So I think about how it's, like how Paul talks about that thorn in the flesh that he asked God to remove and he didn't. We don't like there's a lot of speculation about what that was in Paul's
Mm,
life. I think maybe he wrote about it in one of the Corinthian books.
mhm.
Um, but I see similar to that how anxiety, how that is that thorn in my life that every day it keeps coming back to Jesus. And it reminds me that I'm not the strong one and I don't have to be the strong one because he is. I can be weak. I
Yep.
can admit the fact that like this anxiety has taken me out and I can just bring it to him
Yeah.
and I can just keep leaning on him to show me through. And so yeah, I think that
Mm.
to sum it up, like you are not disqualified and you can still serve in his kingdom and he wants you.
I love that. That's just a beautiful image, and it kinda even makes me think of, like, the broken pot, story, like, we're all broken pots, but that he puts us back together and makes us usable and makes us, kind of like a speaker, where we're able to, speak out and show him to others that maybe wouldn't have seen him before,
Yeah,
unless it was for us. So I really love that you said that.
good.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me. And where can people find out about your book and your blog posts, and
Yeah.
where can they find you online?
Yeah, so the best place to go is just my website is livewithintent.org.
Okay,
And that will
perfect.
have links to all the different things,
Awesome.
um, like the course, to my blog, to my books, everything. I'm
Wonderful.
on Instagram and Facebook as Mrs. _Nichole_Suvar, Mrs. Nichole Suvar. So
Wonderful.
you can find me in both places there as well. I'm usually about 3 times a week. I kind of give myself a boundary that I'm not on it a ton, but 3 days a week I'm posting on there. Usually tips on just our anxiety or our mental health when it comes to our
Mm.
faith.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, and I look forward to continuing to follow you and getting to know you even more, because I love your work. So keep it up, and it was so lovely chatting with you today.
Thank you. I loved this. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'm glad that you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you later